Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the Atomic Energy of Canada Limited annual public meeting. We look forward to this every year as an opportunity to let you know what we've been up to and the status of some important files, so thank you for taking the time to spend a bit of your evening with us. My name is Jeremy Latta, and I'm the Director of Communications and Government Reporting here at AECL, and I'll be our moderator tonight. We have simultaneous translation available, so please feel free to participate in the official language of your choice. First and foremost, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that we here in AECL's Ottawa office are located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. We're grateful for the opportunity to be here tonight. The Algonquin people are the traditional guardians of this land, and we acknowledge and respect their long-standing relationship with this territory. AECL sites across the country are located on the traditional and treaty territories of numerous Indigenous nations. Wherever you're joining us from, I'd encourage you to take a moment to think about the history and the culture of the land that you're standing on, and how, through words and actions, independently and with others, you can cultivate greater respect for and inclusion of those who have cared for these lands since time immemorial. Thank you. So what are we going to do tonight? First, Elder Francis Sarrazin from the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, which is located just up the Ottawa Valley from here near our Chalk River site, has kindly agreed to conduct both an opening and closing ceremony for us. This will help us start our meeting in a good way. Hello, Elder Sarrazin. We'll come to you in just a second. After that, we'll hear from Jim Burpee, the chair of the AECL board, with his perspective. And then CEO Fred DeMarker and a number of AECL officials will take us through some highlighted issues in detail. That will take us about an hour, at the end of which we'll have time for your questions. You can submit questions into the online platform at any time, and we'll do our best to address them tonight. If we run out of time, or if your question requires a more detailed answer, we'll respond to you in writing after this meeting. So that's what our time together tonight is going to look like. And without further ado, I will now ask Elder Sarrazin to get us started and help guide us in our discussions. Elder Sarrazin, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'll hand the floor over to you.
Great. Francis, the District Cause Makwabadon, the Kwakgan, the Dundabab, Mama Mini, and Esnapi Ninda. Jimmy Grits, Kitchmando, Jimmy Grits, Kitchmando, Duty. Kitchmy Grits, Kitchmando, Kitchmy Grits, Kitchmando, Giggle, Grits. I'd like to welcome all you guys on Algonquin territory, unceded land. Today we have like the opening with the prayer, and then I bought the medicines that we're going to use. We used the four medicines that the Creator gave us tobacco for. Tobacco is a produce to the Creator. It's grown on the land. Sweetgrass represents kindness that grows on in the wetlands. The sage is good medicine that purifies our body and use our mind open, and it's good for healing. That cedar that we use that for cedar tea and cedar medicines. So that's the four medicines that the Creator that gave us to use for the Anishinaabe people, our culture. And it's a great honor to be here and do the opening and explain the teachings that I learned, So today should be a really good meeting. I know you guys got a really important task to work with the nuclear power plant, you work with higher power, and we rely on each one of us a good response that, for safety wise, as a team, which to everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. And miigwech, Elder Sarrazin. It's an honor to have you. Thank you. Next, I'm going to ask Jim Burpee, the chair of the AECL Board of Directors, to give us a little overview from his perspective. Jim, over to you.
Thank you, Jeremy. And good evening to everyone joining us virtually to learn more about what AECL has achieved over the last year. We are conducting this discussion tonight at a time when the nuclear sector here at home and around the world is taking off. It feels like we've gone from 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in a heartbeat. But global decisions to invest in new nuclear energy aren't like turning on a tap. A thriving nuclear industry needs to be safe, secure, environmentally sound, and supported by world-class science. And that's where AECL comes in. AECL, through the laboratories at Chalk River, plays a critical role in providing services to the Government of Canada and to the nuclear sector. We are already leading Canada into a sustainable future powered by safe and clean nuclear energy, and we are driving nuclear innovation. We're also endeavoring to make this country a leader in providing our unique, made-in-Canada nuclear technologies to the rest of the world. Let me talk about how we do that. First, we work according to this mandate: to enable nuclear science and technology and to protect the environment by fulfilling the Government of Canada's radioactive waste and decommissioning responsibilities. That mandate was given to us by the Government of Canada, but as a Crown Corporation, while we are owned by the government, we operate at arm's length. This means we can use commercial practices and partnerships and, through the work of Canadian nuclear laboratories, employ private sector efficiencies. This allows us to enlist the best minds available in the nuclear industry and at the same time best serve the Canadian taxpayer with rigorous attention to the bottom line. As board chair, my duties and those of my fellow board members involve providing strategic direction and monitoring performance. This year, the board has witnessed some hard-fought victories and some persistent challenges. This evening, AECL folks will break it all down for you. You'll hear about how, after a lengthy and thorough process, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission gave us the green light to begin construction of the near-surface disposal facility at Chalk River. We'll hear about the major project of renewing a contract under which Canadian Nuclear Laboratories operates AECL sites. AECL officials will describe how they have White Shell decommissioning and up and running at full capacity. They'll discuss the challenges with the sanitary sewage treatment facility at Chalk River, review some achievements in the decommissioning and the cleanup of legacy waste. And finally, they'll talk about some highlights from our science program. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say that, and other board members, other board members stand in awe of the AECL workforce. I noticed, Jeremy, you snuck that back in. But we are, seriously. While demands are multiplying, timelines are shrinking, these talented people do remain a resourceful and flexible powerhouse. Next up, I'll invite President and CEO Fred DeMarker to say a few words. Fred has several members of his team here tonight to give us a deeper look into a few select files, but we'll start with his perspective as CEO on some key issues. Thank you for listening to me, and I now turn the podium over to Jeremy to properly introduce Fred. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much for that overview, Jim. It's great to hear that you're in awe of us, and next year, perhaps I'll include some lines about your particular feelings about the Director of Communications and how great he is. As Jim mentioned, we're going to go through a few topics in detail. So to get us started, I'm going to turn it over to AECL President and CEO, Fred DeMarker. Over to you, Fred.
Thanks very much, Jeremy, and Chimigwech, Elder Serzan, and thank you very much as well, Jim. Our work with nuclear technologies promises to meet the climate challenge, and it's more than just acceptable, it is now in high demand. Just look at some of the recent headlines that we've seen. Slide. Okay. And just today, we got some great news. The Nuclear Waste Management Organization announced that it has selected Wabigoon Lake, Ojibwe Nation, and the Township of Ignace as a future site of Canada's deep geological repository for used nuclear fuel. This is huge news for our industry because the future of waste has been the last unanswered question for nuclear. Nous avons démontré la sécurité grâce à un bilan
We've demonstrated security thanks to our impeccable record. We've demonstrated that we can conduct big projects while respecting the budget and timelines. And today, we have communities that are welcoming of our technologies. The nuclear industry is back, and it's in demand. And that means that there are significant opportunities for Canada.
The birthplace of the CANDU reactor, a remarkably efficient and versatile reactor. The only reactor that produces electricity and medical isotopes at the same time. Canada's 19 CANDU reactors have been providing electricity to around half of Ontario and New Brunswick homes industries, and businesses for decades. And there are 26 CANDU type reactors operating outside Canada in South Korea, Romania, India, China, and Argentina. The CANDU reactor technology is probably our most significant technological export ever, and it was created right here at AECL at our Chalk River Labs. So why am I talking about CANDU? The Government of Canada, through AECL, still owns the intellectual property for the CANDU technology. It recognizes that CANDU, by virtue of its unique attributes, such as the use of natural uranium fuel, is a strategic national asset. We know that Ontario, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and New Brunswick are all looking to invest in new nuclear capacity. We have a successful domestic technology and a generational opportunity to build new CANDU reactors, not only for Canada, but for people around the world, to help us fight climate change, preserve energy sovereignty, create good jobs, and drive economic growth. But for CANDU to get in the game, investments need to be made in a modern design to meet the needs of today's utilities. Commercialization of the CANDU design is currently licensed to the Canadian company Atkins Realis. We are actively working with Atkins Realis to develop a framework for a successful next generation of CANDU reactors. Once again, Canada will be at the forefront of developing and deploying nuclear reactor technology here and around the world. Naturally, our labs will continue to support this effort, as they have all along, as well as the safe and efficient operation of Canada's CANDU nuclear fleet today and into the future. Next, I'd like to speak about our other missions to operate the labs and clean up our legacy waste. I'm extremely pleased to report that the federal government in Budget 2024 announced funding for AECL for the next 11 years, including increased investment in our science and technology mission. Stable long-term funding means that we can continue our work and go even further. Maud Émilie Pagé, Director of the GOCO Procurement and Contract Strategy, and a member of our dedicated procurement team, will join us later to provide more details. Another big issue for my team and me has been the proposed Chalk River Near Surface Disposal Facility, or NSDF. We need this project to allow us to continue the cleanup of the site and the rejuvenation of the Chalk River Labs. This project has been in the works for several years, from site selection and early designs through to consultation with the public and Indigenous communities, all under the oversight of a world-class regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, or CNSC. This past year featured a big milestone for us. After detailed review by expert staff and several public hearings, the CNSC approved the construction of the NSDF in January 2024. Following project approval, there were 3 applications to the federal court for judicial review of various aspects of the regulatory and permitting process. 2 hearings have already been held, and a third to come, and no decisions have yet been rendered. Malgré les procédures juridiques,
Despite this judicial process, we continue to communicate openly and transparently with all involved stakeholders by the project, or interested in the project. We understand that based on the results of these proceedings, we might have more work to do, and we are awaiting with bated breath the court's decisions.
We continue to have an open and transparent communication with all parties involved and interested in the project. We realize that depending on the outcomes of these proceedings, we may have more work to do, and we are eagerly awaiting the court's rulings. There are some excellent resources available online if you'd like to learn more. Just search Chalk River NSDF and go to the CNL site. This past year has involved many regulatory and other proceedings on the NSDF and more, and I would especially like to thank the representatives of all Indigenous nations that participated. On behalf of all of us at AECL, I want you to know that I recognize your significant efforts in preparing submissions and bringing your valuable perspectives to the table. Make no mistake, you have had a positive influence on the project and on our efforts to reconcile with Indigenous communities. Working in collaboration with CNL, AECL is developing and implementing MOUs and agreements that support nation-specific commitments and long-term relationship building with Indigenous partners. And I'm particularly proud of the fact that our board of directors, executive team, and majority of our employees have attended cultural awareness training sessions led by the Algonquins of Pequot-Nagon First Nations. These sessions have been educational and indeed emotional for all of us. We greatly appreciate the opportunity to listen, ask questions, and learn more about our shared history. And we're proud to support the resourcing of two independent Guardian programs, one with the Algonquins of Pequot-Nagon First Nation near the Chalk River site, and one with the Saugeen First Nation near the Whiteshell site. This provides these nations the capacity to build their own environmental monitoring capabilities, including observing and participating in studies and activities on AECL sites. Indigenous reconciliation has become a part of who we are and what we do. We have more to learn and more to accomplish, but I'm proud of our achievements and hopeful for the future. Miigwech to all the First Nations who have helped us. Next, some members of our team will give you some more details on some key files. Thank you for joining us tonight. I look forward to your questions after the presentations. And back to you, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Fred. Next, I'll ask Kathleen Heppel-Massis, our Vice President of Nuclear Operations, to join us. Kathleen, over to you.
Merci, Jérémy. Bonsoir, mon nom est
Thank you,
Kathleen
Jeremy.
Heppel-Massis.
I'm Kathleen Heppel-Massis, and I'm the Vice President of Nuclear Operations here at AECL.
Team and I are responsible for the oversight of the many elements undertaken to verify the safety, security, and environmental performance of our sites. Now, my title says nuclear operations, but in fact, our operations include many things that have nothing to do with radionuclides. And perhaps one of the most important elements at our Chalk River site is something that you might not think of when you think about a national nuclear laboratory, the sanitary sewage treatment facility. This past year, the Chalk River Sanitary Sewage Facility experienced a disruption, and I'd like to take some time to talk to you about what happened, what we did, and also what we learned. The Chalk River site is large. On a busy day, there are about 3,000 people on site, and because of the remote and secure location, that means that we have our own fire department, our own security force, and yes, our own sewage treatment facility. Recent investments in the site included a new sanitary sewage treatment plant, which replaced a 30-year-old outdated facility with a new state-of-the-art plant. In operation since 2019, the plant is based on a biodigester technology. That means that a living organism processes sewage waste from the site naturally to make it safe to release. I visited the sewage treatment facility this year, and I was amazed to find bags of sugar instead of chemicals to purify the water. Earlier this year, routine testing of the effluent from the facility, and effluent here is a fancy word for treated sewage released into the environment. This test revealed that it fell below the standard set by the Fisheries Act. Something was wrong, and the biodigester was not doing its job. We did 2 additional tests, spaced 2 weeks apart, and then notified both Environmental Climate Change Canada's enforcement branch and the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. We communicated with the public, local municipalities, and Indigenous communities. CNL, under our oversight, took immediate actions to fix the problem. This included detailed analysis of what was going down the drains, progressively disconnecting certain buildings to identify any systemic issues, analysis of the biodigester itself, and work to restore its health and education to all the staff on site to ensure that everyone understood how to dispose of cleaning products correctly so as not to damage the biomicroorganisms. The system then returned to proper functioning after several weeks and has been working well since this incident. Most importantly, we did not observe any environmental harm as a result of this shortcoming. But that doesn't mean that AECL or CNL took their foot off the gas pedal to get the issue fixed. The most important thing in my role is to learn from issues. So what did we learn? First, we can do much better in terms of timely communication. Because the initial incident took 2 additional tests to confirm, we waited to inform the public. In the future, we will communicate right away, even if additional tests are required. Second, we realized that the need to test the system more frequently. We already test more than a typical municipal sewage plant, but that's not good enough. We are going to increase the frequency of testing going forward. Third, green cleaning products are critical, and staff need regular education and reminders about how to dispose of cleaning products properly. Because the system is so complex, we still don't know exactly what caused the damage to the biodigester in the first place. But we suspect that some type of product, cleaning products perhaps, damaged the microorganism so that it could not process sewage properly. And finally, another insight around how we communicate. We learned through this process that we need to also make sure that communication about technical matters like this is done in a way that is clear and easily understood by non-experts. Our work can be quite technical and difficult to understand. We need to do a good job explaining the issues and why they are important. Je voulais discuter de ce sujet avec vous ce soir.
I wanted to discuss this topic with you to provide more information because you may have heard it on the news. I wanted to share how protecting the environment is important to us, how our dedication to learning and improving exists, and how we wanted to demonstrate our commitment to transparency, even, indeed, especially when we have challenges. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it over to Jérémy.
Merci beaucoup, Kathleen. Thank you very much. Next, we're going to hear from Maud Émilie Paget. She's our Director of GOCO, Procurement and Contract Strategy. You're going to hear the word GOCO a lot. It stands for Government-Owned, Contractor-Operated. Over to you, Maud.
Merci, Jérémy. Donc, comme mon titre l'indique, je suis responsable du processus. Je travaille dans
Thank you,
l'équipe
Jeremy. So, as my title says, I work in the team that's in charge for the extension of the GOCO model. So, we work with a government-owned contractor-operated model, what we call a GOCO model, in which a private company like NCL are working. So NCL is the operator, and we have the Canadian National Energy Alliance that works in a competition. So we work on the facilities, intellectual properties, and the responsibility of waste management, and LNC are in charge of the operation of the sites and the operating licenses. So we can use the expertise of the private sector in order to get the best results, especially in terms of waste management, and also the transformation of Chalk River laboratories while reducing risks and costs for Canadians.
September of 2015 by Canadian National Energy Alliance, or CNEA, a consortium made up of 3 partner companies, Atkins Reales, Jacobs Engineering, and Fluor Federal Services, under a contract that will expire in September of 2025. AECL has launched a competitive procurement process to continue the management and operation of CNL beyond that date. So what does this mean, and what should we expect? Under the GOCO model, CNL is an enduring entity, meaning that the contractor that manages CNL can come and go, but CNL remains. CNL remains the employer of the workforce, is the licensee, and an enduring entity. What may change is the ownership of CNL, which is currently CNEA. Ongoing work, projects, priorities of CNL remain, and we expect stability in the CNL workforce to deliver on initiatives and existing plans. Finally, the contracts that CNL has in place with the supply chain remain with CNL. Looking at the scope of the contract, it is meant to include the management of all of AECL sites across Canada and cover all of its missions. So science and technology, the objectives of which is to strengthen CNL's role as Canada's national nuclear laboratory, pursue collaborations and partnerships, and advance nuclear innovation for the public good. We're also asking CNL and the new contractor to grow third-party commercial services and revenues. My colleague Karen will expand on this mission area in a few minutes. In decommissioning and waste management, the objective is for CNL to optimize decommissioning, environmental remediation, and waste management activities to reduce AECL liabilities, and my colleague Alistair will speak a little bit more about the work there done at Whiteshell. And we're also asking CNL and the new contractor to continue the revitalization of the Chalk River laboratories to transform the site into a world-class nuclear science and technology campus. In terms of where we are in the procurement process, we've moved from the request for pre-qualification stage, where interested bidders submitted responses and were evaluated in order to be pre-qualified based on criteria that included technical and experience capabilities, financial capabilities, integrity, and security. We're now in the request for proposal stage. We are working per the schedule and are on track and expect to announce a preferred bidder next spring, so spring of 2025. But we're also actively planning for the transition. There will be a transition, and we are working with CNL on preparing for this. Inevitably, there will be some level of change, but the key is that we're focusing on continuity of operations. We will, at AECL and CNL, have to learn to work with new people, new ownership of CNL, and a new senior management team at CNL. There will be some changes. Things that we know will change are the contractor's resources, so the people that the contractor actually brings on site to manage CNL. But there's a lot of things that won't change. So CNL remains the employer of the workforce and licensee. The existing CNL plans remain in place, and as Fred mentioned earlier, they're bolstered by new Government of Canada funding. We expect stability in the workforce to deliver on those plans. The supply chain contracts that CNL has in place remain with CNL. And the transition, our transition activity focus on the continuity of operations and stabilities. So all of the existing projects and plans continue. We're working closely with CNL to prepare transition in and out plans, including a knowledge transfer period for the incoming contractor. And for new up-to-date information on the procurement process, you can always visit our website, which is where we post any new information about it. So that's it for me. Jeremy, I'll be happy to answer questions later if there are any, and I'll pass it back to you.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Maude. It's a good reminder. If you do have questions, you can chuck them into the platform there. And I was remiss, I forgot to wish a happy Thanksgiving to any of our American viewers joining us today. Happy Thanksgiving to you all. I'm happy to report that the Cowboys are I'm unhappy to report that the Cowboys are beating the Giants 27-10 at the start of the fourth quarter. Next, we're going to talk about some of our work to clean up our sites and address legacy waste. And I'm going to turn to our Vice President of Decommissioning and Waste Management, Alistair McDonald. Alistair, go ahead.
Good evening. Thanks, Jeremy. My name is Alistair McDonald, and I am the Vice President of Decommissioning and Waste Management at AECL. I look after the oversight of all of our decommissioning work and the new construction work across our sites. Last year, at this time, we talked about our disappointment with the discovery of several non-compliances in the fire program at the Whiteshell laboratories in Manitoba. This resulted in a safety stand-down that saw the pause of all non-essential work at the site. This year, I have happier news to report. CNL has responded very effectively to the stand-down and took compensatory measures to address the issues discovered. But more than that, they put in place an 8-phase, highly structured plan to return to normal operations. This was a voluntary measure, and it demonstrated AECL and CNL's commitment to safe operation. We went above and beyond to ensure that all the issues were addressed. The team started with low-risk maintenance activities and gradually built out from there. And I'm pleased to report that in October of this year, the final phase of the reopening plan was completed with the removal of 2 radioactive sources from a standpipe in the waste management area at Whiteshell. Whiteshell have now returned to full decommissioning operations. So what's changed? The fire programme at Whiteshell has been significantly improved with an enhanced team, a new fire truck, improved training and procedures. We've also completed infrastructure improvements across the site to reduce the risk of lack of water availability where needed. Plans are shaping up for a new fire hall and training facility, which will save staff the need to travel for some of their training. This will also allow CNL to offer training for other fire departments in the area. I know that the site now has a fire service they can be really proud of. Beyond addressing the issues in the fire protection programme, we've also seen investment in the organisational structure at Whiteshell. There is a new general manager and a broader team of experienced senior staff to support the site. We're already seeing the benefits of this experience and focus. Whiteshell is now preparing for the decommissioning work which lies ahead of them. And in the main, this will be driven by the work to prepare for and remove the legacy wastes from the standpipes and bunkers. But that is no easy task, and to make this happen, we've had to design custom equipment. Right now, a company in Cambridge, Ontario is working on this problem. That work is progressing well. We've just started an intense period of integrated systems and operability testing, and basically that means testing our new equipment extremely rigorously before it's been shipped to Whiteshell. I'll now talk about some of the work taking place at the Chalk River laboratories. Decommissioning and dealing with legacy waste is a big part of our mission, but the Chalk River labs in particular have a bright future as the focal point for nuclear science in Canada for the next generation. As we've heard earlier, the government has invested over $1 billion revitalising the Chalk River campus. We have a new logistics building, a terrific new science collaboration centre with modern offices for our talented staff, and the centrepiece is the new Advanced Nuclear Materials Research Reactor, or ANMRC. The ANMRC will be a 3-storey nuclear research facility with 12 hot cells, along with over 12,000 square metres of floor space and just under 3,000 square metres of additional laboratory space. What are hot cells? They're essentially heavily shielded facilities with thick windows, remotely operated manipulators that allow operators to safely work on heavily irradiated components behind the thick concrete walls. Constructing the ANMRC essentially means a complete replacement of old infrastructure across the site to bring the facilities up to modern standards. And some of this infrastructure dates back to the 1950s, so you can imagine how much things have changed since then. The team had to clear out and demolish several old buildings to create space for the construction of the ANMRC. This will allow the lab to be at the forefront of modern nuclear research and continue the work it does to support the existing fleet of nuclear reactors in Canada, work that will only be more important as we expand our nuclear fleet. It's also important to note that we are in global competition for the best and brightest scientists and engineers. Having modern facilities is critical for us to attract and retain highly specialist workers we need to complete all of our missions. If you visited the labs even a year ago, you would be amazed at the progress we've made. We can look here on a short series of photos showing how the ANMRC construction has progressed to date. You can just see how much has been done. Of course, this is actually the easy part of the project. The real challenge is going to be completing the engineering design and installing the hot cells, setting up the labs and moving equipment. At next year's meeting, I know we'll be in a position to talk more about these elements of the project. This work has been carried out by CNL and many suppliers, primarily a partnership between Chandos, Bird and Sullivan, or CBS, who are all working together under an Integrated Project Delivery, or IPD contract, which enables strong partnership. Our plan is to have the ANMRC commissioned and ready for operation in 2029, completing the major part of the renewal of the Chalk River campus. Well, that's all exciting and new, but it is very important to deal with our legacy liabilities. They only get harder to deal with as time moves on. CNL staff continue to make good progress with the decommissioning of one of the oldest chemical material laboratories in site. This building is known as B250. It's a challenging project, and the team are taking a step-by-step approach through each room and each system to get to the point where this building will be ready for demolition. Over the last year, 31 fume hoods have been removed from the South Tower and 15 removed from the North Tower. Over 700 feet of active drains have been removed from the South Tower, and the team are on target for removal of about 1,000 feet from the North Tower by the end of March next year. There are percolates present in some of the exhaust ventilation systems. These chemicals are a real challenge to deal with. Over the last year, the team has developed procedures and methods for sampling and managing these hazards. The team have engineered, assembled, and trialled a mock-up to rinse and treat these percolates. This is not the first time that this team have had to step back and mock up their decommissioning work. This was previously done to support the removal of highly contaminated tank in an earlier phase of the project. Next year, we'll see the South Tower completely prepared for demolition. The final 18 built-in fume hoods will be removed from the North Tower. These are the oldest and the most contaminate, and the percolates will all be finally removed, as well as a hot cell lead removed, which will go for recycling. The team carrying out this work are mostly CNL staff with support from the supply chain, and this is one of several decommissioning teams at Chalk River and all our sites that are building up a strong decommissioning capability. Thank you very much, and back to you, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And I should apologize, folks, for a little technical difficulty. We did have a cool time-lapse series of photographs showing the construction of the ANMRC, but it didn't work. So perhaps I'll see if we can't get it onto our social media accounts, and we can show you it. Next, we're going to talk about a couple more decommissioning and cleanup projects with Jim McCafferty. He's our Director of Decommissioning and Site Restoration. Over to you, Jim.
Good evening. My name is Jim McCafferty, and I'm the Director of Decommissioning and Site Restoration for AECL. Tonight I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Port Hope Area Initiative, or PHAI, and explain some of the future challenges that we face. The PHAI is a community-requested remediation and of impacted lands in municipalities of Port Hope and Clarington on the shores of Lake Ontario. The picture shown here is the Port Granby remediation when it was in progress in 2020. Material was moved from shallow burials in the foreground of the photo and trucked to a purpose-built, engineered long-term waste management facility at the top of the picture. The project was completed and the long-term waste management facility was capped in 2022. As you can see from this photo taken in 2024, the site has now been restored with over 20,000 tree plantings and is now in long-term care and maintenance. It's a real success story for us and the community. But where did all this low-level waste originate? This map shows what has come to be known as the Northern Transportation Route. From as early as the 1920s, uranium ore was mined in the Northwest Territories and transported by barge and portage to Fort McMurray, where it was loaded onto trains and transported to Port Hope. Once in Port Hope, the initial processing aim was the extraction of radium, which was used for multiple medical and industrial uses at the time. In the 1940s, however, processing moved on to the production of uranium for both military and power generation purposes. The byproduct of both of these extraction processes was what is commonly referred to as mill tailings. This is a very low-level radioactive waste and appears as a soil-like product. From the 1920s up to the 1970s, this waste soil was dispersed extensively across the town as fill materials for foundations, landscaping, or land reclamation. Ravines were filled and material was used as daily backfill at the then operational Highland Drive landfill. When these disposal location sites were no longer available, the ravine at Port Granby became the new destination for this waste. This is not modern good practice, and in 2001 a community-requested remediation was eventually agreed to between the Government of Canada and the municipalities of Clarendon and Pope Hope. The initial scope of the remediation included the burials at Port Granby and 18 major sites and approximately 375 private properties in the town of Port Hope itself. This slide shows the location of the 18 major sites targeted for remediation in Port Hope. 16 of these will complete by December 2024, with the last 2 expected to complete in 2025. It should be highlighted that the final restoration of the harbour is expected to continue into 2026. To date, the PHI has remediated and emplaced nearly 2 million cubic metres, or 4 million tonnes of low-level waste from both the Port Granby site and the town of Port Hope. For the town of Port Hope, over 1.1 million cubic metres of waste has been emplaced in the long-term waste management facility. Although the major sites are near completion, there is still a substantial amount of work left to complete. The original scope considered around 375 private properties or small-scale sites would be required to be remediated. With the characterisation of the town near completion, it is becoming clear that the number of small-scale sites required to be remediated has now risen to over 1,200 properties. This does not include road allowances, of which there are around 250. A major challenge for the PHI is the remediation of the small-scale sites. The diagram here shows schematically the challenge being faced. There are 4 signature elements of the low-level waste required to be remediated. These are uranium, thorium, radium, and arsenic. When these are present in specific quantities, it is recognised that they have originated from the processing of the ore in Port Hope and are targeted for removal by the remediation team. The challenge is that the 3 of these signature elements occur naturally in soil throughout Canada. Identifying the initial low-level radioactive waste deposits is not the challenge. Determining where those deposits stop and the naturally occurring material begins has led some remediations taking over a year to complete, with repeated excavation and soil sampling. The boundary of the excavation has to be substantially extended, which in turn requires removal of more trees and continued disruption to the property owner. The cleanup criteria value which causes the most rework and extension of the remediation boundary is arsenic. The imposed cleanup criteria for soil aligns with the provincial limit of 18 parts per million for arsenic. However, native clean soil in Port Hope has an average range of concentration of arsenic between 5 and 23 parts per million, with some clean samples being measured at over 40 parts per million of arsenic. The project has requested a change to the cleanup criteria to 50 parts per million of arsenic. This is not a unique request for communities in Ontario. 4 other communities in Ontario have had cleanup criteria greater than 50 parts per million being requested, and the municipality of Port Hope recently voted in favour of this change to the cleanup criteria. You might think that it sounds strange that a community would want to request changes to permit higher levels of arsenic, but acceptance of this change would significantly reduce the number of trees that are required to be removed from the town, substantially reduce the time that remediation will take, and minimise the disruption to residents of Port Hope. Most importantly, it would acknowledge that the area has relatively high levels of arsenic that were not caused by historic activity. An application has been made to the nuclear regulator requesting this change, and this is currently progressing through due process. I would now like to give you a brief overview of the decommissioning programme for 2 of AECL's demonstration reactors, Douglas Point and Jean-Tien-1. Douglas Point is located on the Bruce Peninsula within the site boundary of the Bruce Nuclear Power Generating Station on the shores of Lake Huron in Ontario. Jean-Tien-1 is in Quebec on the Gentilly site near Trois-Rivières on the banks of the St. Lawrence River. Douglas Point went into full operation in 1967 and was shut down in 1984. Jean-Tien-1 went operational in 1972 and was shut down in 1978. After shutdown, both facilities were defueled and dewatered. Decommissioning was performed for a variety of secondary systems for both reactor facilities, but no decommissioning of any systems within the reactor buildings were completed at the time. Instead, this was deferred to the current timeframe to allow for decay within the reactor. Decommissioning plan of these facilities restarted shortly after the GOCO model was adopted in 2015. This diagram shows the breakdown of the permissions required to complete decommissioning of the Douglas Point facility. A similar breakdown of steps is adopted for the Jean-Tien facility. Under the existing licences, a number of enabling projects have been completed, which includes hazard abatement, waste inventory removal, electrical and mechanical services rationalisation, as well as the initiation of decommissioning and demolition of the non-active facilities. Both Jontier 1 and Douglas Point are expected to go through the site-specific licensing hearings in the coming years to gain permission from the Nuclear Commission to complete the decommissioning of both facilities. The target completion date for both reactors is 2035. This is a recent photo showing the ongoing demolition of the administration building at Douglas Point. Both this and the turbine building at Douglas Point are expected to be demolished in the summer, by the summer of 2025. Thank you for your time. I now hand you back to Jeremy.
Thank you very much, Jim. And finally, our last speaker of the evening will be Karen Huynh, who is our Director of Strategic Programs and Partnerships. Karen, over to you.
Merci, Jeremy, and bonsoir tout. My name is
Thank
Karen
you,
Huynh.
Jeremy, and
I'm
welcome
the
all.
Director of Strategic Programs and Partnerships. It is my pleasure to be talking about our Federal Nuclear and Science and Technology Work Plan. This was a program that was developed as part of restructuring of AECL. It started in 2015. It was funding to be provided to Canadian nuclear laboratories to support core capabilities through a research program that is responsive to the needs and priorities of government. This represents establishing CNL as truly a national laboratory. We recognize that the Chalk River Laboratories are a unique Canadian asset and home to amazing people, equipment, and capabilities. We also recognize that nuclear needs to be part of the clean energy mix, and as Jim said tonight in his remarks this evening, providing it safe, secure, and environmentally sound. Those are the 4 theme areas of this program: energy, safety and security, health, and the environment. And it is through these 4 theme areas that the program is responding to the needs and priorities of 15 government departments and agencies. The participations of departments and agencies are broad, which means our research is broad. It includes participations from our science-based departments like Health Canada, National Research Council, National Defence, and policy decision makers such as Natural Resources Canada, as well as our regulator, the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. We are not just looking at nuclear energy for land, but we're also looking at it for space and marine applications. So what is it that we're doing in this program? It is setting the foundation by maintaining and developing capabilities at the lab that is needed to support Canada as a Tier 1 nation. The same capabilities that are used to support government is enabling the nuclear industry to advance the deployment of their technologies. It is providing that science-based evidence to support policy and regulatory decision-making. It is ensuring that Canada can compete internationally and demonstrate leadership where we have that unique competitive advantage. It is fostering innovation in technologies while also developing the next generation of workers that is needed. I want to spend a few minutes talking about the research that we do in each of these 4 theme areas. These would just be a couple of examples. We have on average 130 projects every year. I'm going to start with health. A large part of our program is supporting regulatory decision-making and improving our understanding of the effects of low-dose radiation on living things. This includes an 8-year lifespan study with Health Canada, the CNSC, and the CANDU Zoners groups, which involved over 3,000 mice housed in our unique biological research facility, and it's providing the evidence to inform the radiation protection framework. It's also including looking at medical applications and the next isotopes that is needed, such as actinium-225. It started here with this program. It looked at the feasibility of producing actinium-225 with materials we had on site. That has led to the joint venture called Actinier. In the environment theme area, we are supporting the development of Canadian water quality guidelines by looking at the toxicity of polonium-210 in the freshwater environments. For 3 years in a row, researchers at CNL is working closely and collaboratively with students, teachers, and elders from the Clearwater River Dean Nation to collect samples needed to support those guidelines. Under safety and security, our federal partners with Defence, Research and Development, and Canadian Border Security agencies are developing capabilities to improve border security. It also includes the exercises we develop with our federal family and industry, and the most recent exercise with our U.S. partners from the NNSA and Bruce Power at Sandia National Labs to improve our physical and cybersecurity posture. Lastly, under our energy theme area, we are supporting Canada's existing nuclear power fleet and working with our regulator to expand the understanding of aging mechanisms and their impact on failure limits. Since 2015, we have invested approximately $250 million across 99 projects to advance the deployment and operations of advanced reactors and small modular reactors in Canada. These projects are being leveraged today through CNL's Canadian Nuclear Research Initiative, support collaborative projects through third-party proponents to accelerate the deployment. Our hydrogen expertise is being used to support techno-economical feasibility assessments with the Canadian Coast Guards to look at different emissions and fuels. Those are just some examples of what we're doing on our program. And if you want to learn more about our program, please visit the AECL website. We have made available the posters of our research from our workshop in 2019, which has garnered the attention of 400 participants from government, academia, and industry. We've received more than 800 participants in 2003. These important workshops disseminate our research beyond the federal family and make them accessible for us to use with our partners, academia, and industry, bringing it all back to our mandate of enabling nuclear science and technology in Canada. Looking ahead to the next 10 years, the government has provided AECL with continued funding under our federal nuclear science and technology to support priorities in climate change, innovation, health, safety and security, and the environment. It is supporting those capabilities needed to support existing and new builds in Canada. It is enhancing those capabilities that we have that are unique that allows us to build our competitive advantage, such as in fusion and the tritium fuel cycle, and our joint venture with Kyoto Fusioneering. The next 10 years means we can continue to be responsive to government, increase our collaborations with academia, and enable nuclear science and technology for the benefit of Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And thank you, Karen, Jim, Alistair, Maude, Kathleen, very much. And I think you've got a really great overview for you folks watching tonight of the breadth and depth of what's happening here at AECL. And we've really just scratched the surface. There's a lot going on, and we're very proud and excited about the work that we're doing. Now, we mentioned throughout tonight that we've got an opportunity for questions, so I'd really encourage you, if you've got a question or two you'd like to throw into the platform there, please do so. We've got lots of time to answer them, and we've got a few in the queue, so we're just going to get right to them. Fred and Jim, I'm going to start with you two. This one's a big picture question, and the context here is we talked a lot about sort of the opportunities facing the nuclear sector and maybe some of the risks facing the nuclear sector. But in general, there's a lot of excitement and opportunity around the sector right now. So the question for you both is, what are the biggest opportunities and the threats that you see that would prevent us from realizing the nuclear opportunity before us? Jim, perhaps I'll go to you first, and then Fred.
Okay, thanks, Chairman. I think by far the biggest opportunity is pretty clear to most people in terms of the role for nuclear, whether it's fission or in the long-term fusion, in terms of supporting the energy transition to dealing with basically a net zero future when it comes to climate change. So big opportunity, requirement for a lot of things to happen. We need a lot of more electricity is going to be required. That's clear to pretty well everyone. So there's the opportunity on the nuclear side. In terms of risk or threats, you know, the challenge comes down to, it's not unique to nuclear as well. It is, a lot of it comes down to people, engineering, construction, project management. There's a lot of work to be done to bring a design, whether it's a design concept or even if it's a fairly existing design that only requires a little bit of tweaking to make it ready and get it approved through a regulatory process. You still need a lot of people to do all the detailed engineering, do all the work, the construction jobs, and of course manage a project so that it's done safely and on time, and for the cost. However, we're not the only industry that is looking for a lot of the same skill sets. Again, driven by the same opportunity that is there, whether it's hydro, solar, wind, any other non-emitting technology. And then it all needs to be put together with transmission. So there are a lot of overlapping skill sets to be competition. And the other resource to be competition for is, we were remiss in not saying this, it's money. because it all requires money to put it together. And it really requires a long-term vision of where do we want our energy system to get to and a commitment to pushing forward. And the time is not on our side.
Thank you, Jim. Fred, what do you think?
Yeah, Jim covered off some of the most important items, but to add to that list, there's a couple of other significant challenges that we need to make sure that we address. One of those is parts, Canada is one of over 20 countries that has committed to triple nuclear energy by 2050. So you can imagine the amount of work that will be going on. It won't only challenge us from a people perspective, but it'll challenge us from a supply chain perspective. And one of the best ways to mitigate that risk is to have diverse technologies that use different parts. And this is, for me, a big part of CANDO. It offers a diverse design, and which means that we can avoid some of the supply chain bottlenecks that I am certain will occur. The other aspect that's really critical to success or can potentially pose a threat is mechanisms for ensuring that regulatory approvals do not end up on the critical path of projects. One of the biggest contributors to extensions of major nuclear projects has been that these projects have found themselves in a situation where they needed regulatory approvals to make changes to the design after the construction had started. So that presents a risk that needs to be mitigated if we're going to be successful. And one of the best ways to mitigate that risk is once you've built a reactor, stick with the design and replicate that into a fleet. So those are a couple of additional threats and opportunities for us, Jeremy.
Thanks very much, Fred and Jim. So people, money, parts, regulatory approvals. You look like you've got your finger up, Jim. Go for it.
Well, I'd like to say there's also an opportunity within the opportunity, and this is for the broader energy transition as well, is facilitating and pushing forward Indigenous reconciliation.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm very proud of the work that AECL and CNL have done in this regard. But there's so much more that can be done, and when I look at all the infrastructure that's required across the country, it cannot be done without dealing or really reconciling all our issues on that front.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. A great addition. Another question, and again, I'll remind you, if you have questions, please throw them in there. We talked earlier today, Fred mentioned the near-surface disposal facility, and just a brief history there. The near-surface disposal facility proposed for Chalk River was approved for construction, passed in this past January, and it's currently the subject of 3 separate judicial reviews. And effectively, that's a process that asks a court to look at the decision. And the question we have here is, the near-surface disposal facility is undergoing several judicial reviews. What's your AECL's position on those proceedings? And I'll look to Alistair McDonald or Fred. I don't know which one of you wants to tackle this one first.
Well, why don't I start off and then hand it over to Alistair?
Sure.
And well, let me first say that AECL stands behind the project, the NSDF project. We believe that the process that was followed by the CNSC and to which CNL and AECL contributed to get to the decision was a good process. Having said that, we also very much respect the rights of parties to appeal the decisions, and that's very much part of our democratic process, and the right of the court, of course, to make its own determination. And we very much look forward to that decision, and will be listening very closely to not only the decision, but the basis for that decision to decide what if any, next steps we will take. And with that, I'll hand it over to Alistair, who can complement that.
Terrific. Alistair, go for it.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Fred. And just to complement that, as far as what we can do, I think at this stage, all we can really do right now is to review decisions as they're made and to assess our options from there. There's not much really we can do. There's lots of hypothetical options and positions moving forward, but until we actually get the results out of the judicial system, We just have to, wait and see and respect that process. But ultimately, we did propose this project for very good reasons. There's a lot of low-level waste. It's mostly at the Chalk River right now, and it's in temporary storage. So having the waste on site in containers, it's just not a permanent solution. So we do definitely need a permanent low-level waste disposal solution moving forward.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Alistair, and stick around because we've got another one directly for you. It was great that you showed us a picture of Building 250. I know we talk a lot about decommissioning and our legacy sites and legacy buildings, et cetera. It was nice for people to actually be able to see what one looks like. So you saw Building 250 on one of the slides there as Alistair was speaking. And the question we have here is, what is the ultimate destination for wastes generated from Building 250, especially hot cells demolition? And is there any idea on the expected volumes of low-level waste, intermediate level waste, and high-level waste from Building 250? So, Alistair, just the general story of what happens with the waste from Building 250, especially the hot cells.
Sure, yeah, thanks, Jeremy, and thanks to whoever asked that question. Yeah, as you might have seen from the picture, and for anyone that's broadly aware of B250, it's a building of, it goes back a long time with a lot of mixed materials, including wood, concrete, lead in that building. The first thing, and the most important thing really, is to recognise it's mixed waste. So the first thing that happens really is to understand, characterise and segregate that waste. And our objective really is, by doing that, to have as much clean as possible. So you'll see, a number of facilities around Chalk River that are geared up to sort and segregate waste. We will recycle what we can, and there are some, like the perchlorates I mentioned, where they may well go for third-party recycling and processing. But much of the waste in that building will be low-level waste, and ultimately it's destined for the near-surface waste, the near-surface disposal facility. So we have to wait the final demolition of that building really until we get the near-surface disposal facility available. But we also have some intermediate level waste, or ILW, in that facility, and that waste will be safely stored on site at Chalk River until there is a national ILW waste repository ready, which, as many know, that's now beginning to be worked on by the NWMO.
Thank you very much, Alistair. And speaking of the NWMO and the Deep Geological Repository, we've got another question here. And this was news hot off the presses this morning, actually. So we kind of figured this question might come up today. Fred, I'm going to give this one to you. And if anyone else wants to jump in, they're more than welcome to. But the Deep Geological Repository. Can you expand on today's announcement and AECL's role and position with respect to the Deep Geological Repository? What does it mean for AECL? Fred?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jeremy, and it is really a very critical milestone. So when you talk to the public about nuclear energy, typically you get three big questions. What about the safety of the reactor? And we've addressed that. Our reactors, especially the CANDU reactors, have an impeccable record of safety since 1962, when the first one started operating. The second question they raise is, what about the cost and the schedule? We hear about all these long overruns, and we've addressed that largely in Canada through the major refurbishments that have been delivered on time and on budget. So the third question that's always asked is, what about the waste, especially the how do you deal with the fuel that's been discharged from the reactor? And now we have a solution. We always, for a long time, we've been developing the technology. We have a technological approach, but what we needed was a willing host. And with the announcement today, we have achieved a very significant milestone in that we have a willing host, including, very importantly, a willing First Nations community to host this Deep Geological Repository. For me, once we have that solution in the works, and we've proven that we're able to continue our record of excellent project execution in a new build context this time, it demonstrates that nuclear is one of the key options to moving forward with decarbonization and to providing a stable, secure, reliable, and safe source of generation. So that's what it means to me.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Fred. And I can tell you it was a nice feeling around the office today when we saw that announcement come across the wires. It's nice to see some positive news in the sphere of nuclear and the nuclear sector. The next question is for Kathleen Haplomasis, our VP of Nuclear Operations. Kathleen earlier spoke about the wastewater effluent issue that happened at Chalk River earlier this year, and we have a question, and we've been asked this question several times, so I'm not surprised to see it, and that is, regarding the wastewater issue, what was the nature of the contamination? Was it radioactive material, something else? What was the contamination? Kathleen, I wonder if you could speak to that.
That's a great question there, Jeremy. Thank you for asking. And certainly one that, in our opinion, illustrates that we could have done better in terms of communication. We were focused on getting all the technical details right, but we did not quite give a simple explanation on what the contamination was. And the answer is it was basically improperly treated sanitary sewage. It was not radionuclides. It was not industrial waste or anything of that nature. It was simply sewage waste. So that's what I can offer to you now.
Thank you very much, Kathleen. And as the Director of Communications, I too struggle. I think I was trying to be too polite sometimes when we talked about it, and what we really needed to say was, this is sewage. So thank you, Kathleen. All right, another question here. Sorry, I'm just looking at my list as things are coming in. And again, if you have questions, please put them into the platform. Fred, this is another one for you. I think you might enjoy this question, actually. You talked about the legacy of existing CANDU reactors earlier and their proud record for efficiency, safety, and efficient operation. And the question here is, if we have that great design and if we are still operating those reactors today, and if their designs are sound, why do we need to spend so much time and money designing new reactors for the next generation? Over to you, Fred.
Yeah. Jeremy, first of all, when you build a reactor and start operating it, you realize through the course of operation all the things that you need to do to enhance operation. So now we have 30, 40 years of operation behind us. We have a lot of operating experience. We need to capture all that operating experience and put it in the design from the get-go. The second thing is, technology has improved. When we designed these reactors, there was very little in the way of digital technology. Today, there's very, very little in the way of analog technology. So we need to convert the plants to reflect what the current technological availabilities are and what the state of the art is. And finally, there are major changes that have occurred. Like, for example, when you go into the control room of a newly designed reactor, it doesn't look like the control room of the that you would see if you, say, for example, walked into a Pickering A reactor. The knobs, the dials, they've been replaced by screens, and there's been a lot of changes in the human-machine interface between the operator and the reactor. So those are just some of the examples of why we need to upgrade the technology, and we want to have the best available the best reactors we can have going forward, so they can operate at higher capacity factors and at higher efficiencies all around with lower costs.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Fred. And that's a great example of how lucky we are here at AECL to have staff and leadership who have been inside those control rooms and know what they're talking about. It's not just on paper, it's lived experience for you, isn't it? We've got another question here. Karen, I think this one's going to be for you if you'd like to make your way to the stage. The question is, are there plans for a new multi-purpose research reactor in Canada anytime on the horizon? Karen, what do you think about that? Research reactor, what are the plans?
Thanks, Jeremy. So I'll start first off by saying that our NRU is a national asset, right? Its contributions were enormous from science to isotope production. Back in 2019, we held a series of workshops. We engaged stakeholders from government, industry, academia, and the consensus was we absolutely do need a multi-purpose research reactor in Canada, right? And so that was the need, and we identified that need. What are we doing today? Well, we're trying to put together information and what does that multi-purpose research reactor looks like. And so as AECL, with our convening power, we are putting together joint projects with our academic partners, with industry, with government, from federal governments to municipal governments to provincial governments, and we're looking at what does that multi-purpose research reactor look like in Canada for the benefit of all. And that's ongoing. So if you do want to collaborate with us, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to work with you.
Thank you very much, Karen. And I think that brings us to the end of our questions. Unless we have any last minute, I'm looking over at the team. They are saying no more questions. We are good. And an important update, the Giants stormed back with 10 points in the fourth quarter, outscoring the Cowboys 10-0, but they did fall short 27-20. That brings us to the end of our meeting this evening. And as usual, we really enjoy this. I'm going to give it the floor over to Elder Francis Sarrazin one more time for closing ceremony to conclude our proceedings here. Elder Sarrazin, the floor is yours.
Great. Francis, this is Cosmo from the I'd like to share a little bit of history of Buffalo people, my dad was a wood carver. He can take a block of wood and make a hammer out of it. And my grandfather was a bush pipe tune maker, and everything was all going off the land, and we take good care of the land, But I say my dad's prayer because I know that he's passed on that spirit world, and I like to share it with you guys, it's a pretty awesome prayer. Oh, great spirit, please guide my hands, also my mind. I love thee, I believe in thee. I pray each night and day that I never walk alone. I thank thee for the air that I breathe, the food that I eat, the water that I drink, the fuel I burn my furnace. I thank thee for all the blessings and gifts that you bestow upon me. Please protect me when I'm weak. I put lots of love in every poem and carving that I make. I'm a humble and caring man. I like my country music. I like everything's beautiful. That makes my day. Miigwech. That's good.
Miigwech, thank you very much. Thank you, Elder Sarrazin. And I'd just like to close by saying thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you to the technical team here and everybody who made this happen, but especially thanks to you folks who tuned in. We really appreciate it. We actually enjoy this opportunity to give you a little insight into what we're up to. And if you do have questions, please reach out. And yeah, we just really enjoy the opportunity to engage with folks who care about the sector and care about our organization. And with that, I will thank you finally for one last time and bid you good evening.